Hi, Suzanne Young here, and today I am here to talk about sex and YA, or what I like to call the ABCs of hooking up. You may wonder what qualifies me to talk about hooking up and YA, and I give you Exhibit A and Exhibit B. I think together those equal a PhD in teen hooking up. But seriously, it is an issue that I see a lot on message boards. How far is too far? Do I have to mention protection? There's so many different ways you can go here. Personally, I am, none of my actual hooking up necessarily happens on the page. That's just my preference. But there are books that do kind of go there, and they do it well. For example, Perfect Chemistry, one of my favorite books, and I have to say part of it was because it was smoking hot. Some of the things that I think you might want to avoid when writing sex and YA is going a little too romance novelish. We don't need to hear about anything throbbing or flowering or anything like that. Keep it realistic, but not gross realistic, unless that's the point. I think hooking up is a very natural thing, and as long as you're not doing it for shock value, I think it's okay to have it in there. Now, of course, there's some books that the whole point is just please kiss, and it doesn't feel like they're holding back. It feels natural because that works the whole tone of the book. But I'll tell you, one thing that drives me nuts is when I read a book and there's tons of sexual tension, and yet they can't get together because like interspecies dating or something. It feels a little bit to me like they're purposely trying to avoid the hookup, and it leaves me wanting more, so to say. But I think a lot of people who read, and I'm not saying everyone, me personally, when I read a book, I look for romance. That's one of the reasons I pick a book up. So if I pick it up and it promises some romance, but instead it's just a lot of sexual tension with no payoff, I find that frustrating. I don't believe, and of course there's editors who can probably attest to this better than me, I don't think having a steamy sex scene will stop your book from getting published. I mean, that's why we have editors. They can help us position our book for the market. And yes, I said position, I'm sorry. And so, for example, when I wrote the naughty list, it was actually a little bit more scandalous than it is now. And I decided to take some of it out. But at the time, no one told me to. It was just, I felt that is the way I wanted to proceed with it. Didn't really matter, because it's still got a cover that looks like this. But I did actually tone it down for my own interest. Protection. Mentioning it in a book, I see debated over and over again. You know, what's preaching, what's this, what's that. I think there's a way you can have it be realistic and still put it in there. For example, Shiver, I think, handles that really well. The characters, they mention it afterwards, and I thought it was just, to me, I thought it was very realistic the way it was done. And then sometimes you'll read a book and they'll mention it, and you're kind of like, okay, Mom. So I think it's a matter of making it feel right for the characters. I did not mention it in the naughty list, and believe me, people took me to task on that. But the reason I didn't wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because they actually didn't have sex on page. If they did, of course I would have mentioned it. It just seemed like it wouldn't work for them to mention it afterwards. But when my newest book, Need So Beautiful, that comes out this summer, and I have another book coming out in the fall called Delinquents, I do mention it after the fact, but I do mention it, and I mention it in a very sly way so that it's not me telling everyone, this is what you have to do. But I think it is good to have it in there. It is also something that you can talk about with your editor. I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker if you don't mention it. It'll be something that, depending on how you're going to position the book in the market, what they'll want in there. And so my final thoughts on sex and YA hooking up, I like it, but I think overall what you need to think about when you're writing it is keep your audience in mind, but not to the point where you're thinking of it as a parent or a teacher. You should be thinking of it as a writer, as the characters. What's real for them? What would they do in these situations? You can always tone it down later. I mean, it's not, once it's on the page, it's not set in stone. You will have other people that have their hands on your work, and I do mean your work, so they will help you sculpt it to what it needs to be. But I think more than anything, there's nothing more painful to read than forced sexual tension, forced non-sexual tension. I can't stand it when things are not real to the characters, and it's very obvious when the writer will step in and say, oh, we're going to close the curtain on that one. Just, be tasteful. No one wants to see, everything on page. I mean, leave something to the imagination. I think as long as you handle it realistically for the characters, whether it's in a paranormal, fantasy, contemporary, as long as you handle it for the character, you're gonna do it justice, and then you let your agent and editor handle the rest. So thank you for stopping by. I'm so happy I got to do this, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I get to see some of your hooking up on page. Wait, no, that's not what I mean at all.